All right, part B of exploring the Americas. So this should be after you've already watched part 1. And again, the essential question that we're looking at is, why do people move to the Americas? Why would you pack up, move from everyone and everything that you know, and the conveniences of the modern world in 1600s, and move across an ocean? All right, so our focus today in this video is, where are the colonies of Europe located in the Americas? What are the different regions? Where specifically each region is, and again, motivations for moving there. So this is a typical map that we look at. And again, this is early 1700. This is pretty much the extent of the expanse at that point. And we see blue being New France, Canada into the Mississippi Valley, Louisiana area. Right, we see Great Britain along the east coast of the Atlantic Ocean, all the way up to Maine. And Maine was under debate back and forth. So by 1700, we've already had a French and Indian War. So if you looked at maps earlier than 1700, the boundaries in the New England area are going to be a little bit different. We see Spanish Florida, Spanish Mexico, and then up into what's now the United States. Now, what this map doesn't show you is the Caribbean. And so you have to also think about the Caribbean islands. There's so many of them there. And in those Caribbean islands, you're going to see Dutch. You're going to see Swedish colonies. You're going to see French colonies, Portuguese, Spanish colonies. So every major European nation has colonies in the Caribbean. And then we're also going to see some of those countries having colonies in South America. The largest colony, of course, being what's today Brazil, and that was controlled by the Portuguese. All right, so we looked at this in the last video. Why do you move, right? So increase your own personal wealth. And also, why do some monarchs want to support this exploration and settlements is because they want to increase wealth for their nation. Religious freedom. So some people are going because they want to have religious freedom, and other people are going because they want to spread their faith. We have different point of views, different people, right? And then personal glory, adventure, your nation's power and fame. So everybody has a little bit different motivation, and often these were combined. Right, so the mother country is going to be the country in Europe, the monarch, right? So think mother country is the monarch, right? And that's the one who's going to control the colony in the Americas or anywhere else a colony might be. So we're talking Europe, France, Holland, or Portugal, right? And so the mother country benefits with these colonies because they're going to be able to get a hold of cash crops and other resources at a cheap price, right? You're going to keep it in the family. So your colonies are going to sell it to you. You're not having to basically pay a middleman. They're coming direct to you. And not only that, but if you have people living in colonies, they're going to need to buy just essential items, glassware, right? You don't think about, what are you going to store liquids in? Not just buying things in glasses, but what do you do with glasses? How do you store water and juices or jellies and jams that you do make in your new country? You have metal objects, guns, definitely a big thing that's produced in England, gunsmithing shops. You have fashion goods that are going to be produced, especially cloth, paper goods that are going to be produced. So there's so many goods that are produced in the mother country, good quality. The price usually isn't ridiculous. And so it's a lot easier to buy furniture from somebody in England than it is to take the time to make your own furniture, because you're just trying to build your own home at that point, right? So this goes back and forth. And so the mother country is selling these manufactured goods. I didn't mention like linen, tableware, cutlery. And so over time, we're going to see that these craftsmen and people who are able to make these products do move to the colonies. But in the beginning, everything's having to come from the mother country in Europe. And even over time, people still say, well, I want to buy my dress from this fashion shop, or I want my lace from this fashion shop. And it was supposedly higher quality, right? So we all understand that buying and selling is good and necessary, as I believe Adam Smith said this. He's a Scottish man. but they're saying that it's not always the best thing. Sometimes it brings out the worst in us, right? But this becomes a time of mercantilism. So mercantile, or the mercantile store, is where you would go, like your general store. And the merchant, right? The merchant is the person who sells you the goods. And what we see is a rise in the merchant class. We see a rise of business people. People are either buying and selling raw materials or buying and selling finished products. So we see that rise of these tradespeople, these professional people who own businesses, and they're getting wealthier and wealthier. Shipbuilders, ship owners, if you are into shipping at this point, it's going to be making you lots of money. Of course, you have a lot of money to lose too, but a lot of money to make. So I think the notes that I sent you are a little bit different, but if you didn't download the notes, this is an easy way to go ahead and just look at, what were the motivations for the Spanish moving to the Americas? What resources were they finding in the Americas? And then any important facts. And we're going to do this for New Spain, English, and New England, and then New France. So with the Spanish, think of S. They're looking for silver, souls, and Asia. And I would just write a big S as I'm writing Asia. Okay. They're also getting gold out of there. And we can't forget sugar. I don't have sugar mentioned here, but everyone was wanting sugar because sugar was where your money was at. All right. But these are the major things that they're going to get. And advantage for Spanish, and one of the reasons they go into the Philippines, we'll talk about in class 5, I think it is, or class 4, East meets West, is that the Chinese only wanted to trade with silver. That was what they wanted. If you wanted to buy something from Chinese, they wanted you to pay with silver. And so the Spanish were literally digging up the silver, and then they could sell it to the Philippines where it was processed, and then they would be able to buy Asian trade goods. So that was really an advantage for the Spanish. It also led to a lot of pirating, especially by the English. So the Spanish monarchy is going to finance most of the voyages. They're looking at becoming wealthy. They definitely see the value in the silver and gold that they're digging up. The Spanish also have a different system, so they develop a caste or social system. And one of the advantages, if you were Spanish, is that if you were given land in the New World, in New Spain, you were also given the people who lived there. It was called the encomienda system. And the encomienda system meant that you could enslave the people who were living on your land. So if you had a boundary line and you come across a village within your boundary line, all of a sudden, those people you can enslave. Of course, as the Spanish quickly found out, they're going to die from disease and overwork and run away. But a lot of people within the area of New Spain are enslaved, and many die for different reasons. All right, I will send you this video. All right, so let's look at the English colonies. So the English monarchy is not like the Spanish. They're not trying to spread the word of the Catholic Church. They really don't even want to take the risk. They're a little bit tighter with their money. And so they're going to allow joint stock companies to take the risk because they know they can tax the income on those people. And to be sure, the Spanish were also taxing their people. In fact, there's a great story. I was watching a documentary, and in that documentary, it was talking about how the Spanish in the Americas would try to cheat the customs officers, and they would make the silver bars and gold bars weigh more than they said that they did, and that they were paying off somebody that when the gold or silver bars would offload on the boat, they would write down the weight as being less, and then they would pay less tax on that. Another thing is, during that time, you didn't pay taxes on jewelry. And so that's why you see a lot of pirates or people, they would wear their gold. They would wear their silver. In fact, you have the gold necklaces or gold belts we would see with the chains linked together. And they could literally cut off a chain and then they would weigh it, one of the links, and they could weigh it, and that's how they could pay for goods. So it was like you were wearing your cash on yourself. All right, so Britain doesn't fare too well. Britain has a few internal problems going on, and they're a little bit late to the exploration party. The Roanoke voyages in the 1580s, they fail. So they have 3-4 colonies that they try to get started, and they all fail for different reasons. The Spanish are the first in, and the Spanish really quickly build colonies. And a lot of it's probably because they had the support of the monarchy, right? But once the English get there, and the first colony being Jamestown is able to survive, they quickly realize that they might not be in Asia, but there's lots of resources to take advantage. It might not be silver and gold, like what the Spanish are digging up, but they have land that's going to grow wheat that you can sell. The North Atlantic waters are full of cod, and people in Europe love to eat cod. They can salt it and ship it overseas. Furs. It's very fashionable to wear furs, felted furs at this point, especially beaver fur. And so this was as valuable to the English as silver and gold was to the Spanish. And the English have their own sugar plantations in the Caribbean, so they're not doing without as far as that goes either. Right, so you have lumber, that's what the axes are for furniture making, for building ships. You have tobacco that's going to really make Jamestown successful. Jamestown probably would not have been successful had it not been for tobacco. And here's an image, and this is from 1823, but I like this image because it gives you a good look at what it takes to make sugar. And you see all the enslaved people that are working there, and they're coming up the hill. They have the cane that's been cut down, and it's in the wagons. Then it has to be crushed. Then after it's crushed, the syrup's drained off. Then that syrup has to be boiled several times. And it's very, very, very time-consuming and hard work to actually make that white crystal sugar that we use so much. And this is where rum comes about, from the use of molasses. In fact, a lot of the molasses was not processed on the sugar islands. It was actually sent to New England, and New England would process the molasses into rum, alcohol, and then that would be sent to Europe and to Africa and to other places. And so they almost have, like, a middleman, like, I'll make this and you make that. But this is a good image. And also I like the fact that you're seeing that they're using wind energy. Okay? And notice that they can change the windmill's angle. There's that red bar, so they're actually able to move that as the wind moves around the island. All right, here's another image, a sketch. Again, sugar and molasses, and you see those huge barrels and how they're being loaded onto the smaller rowboat that's going to then take them out to the bigger ships. And in the distance, we can see the windmill and the smoke where they're boiling the sugarcane syrup to make molasses and sugar. All right, so let's look at France. So France comes in between, really, Spain and England. They finance some voyages to the Americas looking for that Northwest Passage, but what's going to be unique about the French is they are not settling. Similar to the Spanish, you don't see a lot of families moving at first. There's not a lot of impulse for families to move there. You see more men that are going. So in Spain, Spanish colonies, we're going to see men running the plantations, see men running the silver and gold mines, but you don't have a lot of families in the beginning. You don't have people leaving with their family to set up, not like we do in the English colonies. So in New France, you're going to have fur traders. And, as a fur trader, you're going to go off into the woods during the winter, set your traps. You come back in spring, you sell your furs. Then you don't work in the summer. So some of these men would actually travel back to France, or they would just live with the Native Americans. And that's something that we see that's very different. And that's why I have a Native American on this slide, is that the French saw themselves more as partners with the Native Americans. So if we talk about the Spanish were more like, follow me, be like me. You need to learn Spanish. You're going to be enslaved as a Spanish, and you're going to follow my faith. The English were more like, just get out of our way. Thanks for helping. We don't need you anymore. Go away. And the French were like, hey, dude, thanks for helping me out. You don't mind if I live here for a little while, do you? And again, you don't have families coming, so they're not taking over the land. They're not cutting down all the trees for the Navy like the English are. They're not building huge farms like the English are. And so they have a pretty good relationship. In fact, the French make just as much money from furs and fish as the Spanish do from silver and gold. Right? And again, so think French, F, they're friendly, right? So they're the friendlier ones with the Native Americans. English would just like them to go away. And so one of the differences we see is that French Jesuit priests who live among the Native Americans. So while the French are wanting to spread their faith, they're doing it in a way, again, that's a partnership. And these French Jesuit priests would live among the nations, live in their villages. They would learn their languages, learn their customs, the prayers they would even adapt for the culture and for nature. And so, again, it's more of a partnership. Now, by the time we get to the 1800s, that's going to change. But in the beginning, it's more of a friendly partnership. All right, so the French also have islands in the Caribbean and plantations. And indigo, which is a huge cash crop, it makes a beautiful blue jean color. All right, that's being grown in the West Indies. And again, very, very labor intensive. Right, and so you have to plant the crop, you have to harvest the flowers, then the flowers have to be boiled, and you can see the different steps that it's boiled. It comes to dry powder, and that's what they're hanging it to dry, and then it's going to be shipped back. All right, so when we look at who lived in just the colonies in general, if we focus on the Spanish colonies and French colonies, it's going to be mostly men. In Spain, you're going to have more wealthy men and some soldiers, the conquistadors. In New France, it's going to be pretty much any man, not necessarily a wealthy man, but a man who's willing to work hard. And Jesuit priests. And you're going to find Catholic priests also with the Spanish. In the English colonies, right, you have a wide variety of people living. So in the English colonies, we're going to see all different levels of people, from very poor people who are going to indenture themselves as servants for 3 to 7 years, depending on your contract. You have people who are into shipping. You're going to have military people there in the colonies. You're going to have people from Scotland, people from Holland, because you have New Amsterdam, New Netherlands. You're going to have Swedish people, New Sweden. Eventually, we're going to see people coming over from Germany. So quite a variety of people in the English colonies, and of course, very wealthy people. Native Americans, you're going to see people who live in villages. These are not nomadic people. They have farms, they have traditions, they live in and among the land, but they also depend on the land. And so that's going to cause them to come into some problems with English as we look further on in the studies. The Spanish, because they were taking the people as part of the land, they really almost kill off the Native Americans in the area of New Spain because of disease and slavery. Right? Native Americans in the British colonies, we're going to talk about next week, and I'll get into a little bit more on that. And of course, now in all of the colonies, you will find enslaved people from Africa. And it's going to vary. So in New France, you're not going to find that many because there's not a lot of farms in the beginning. It's hunters, and you hunt by yourself, or you might have a partner, or 2 or 3 men that have a campsite and go off. In New Spain, you will see a lot of enslaved people because, well, one problem was that natives were dying from disease and overwork. And so you're going to see a lot of people enslaved from Africa in New Spain. You're going to see, of course, many enslaved people in Brazil, many enslaved people in all throughout the Caribbean islands. In the English colonies, it's going to depend where you are. Okay. So some people were pushed because of religion, right? That they couldn't worship the way that they wanted to. Excuse me. Other people were pushed because they felt that they were desperate and had no other option. They were poor and they couldn't find work. Other people were pushed because they were forced to because of slavery. Right? And with that, I'm going to talk more about that next week. But Native Americans were also enslaved. And lots of times what would happen is, especially in the New England area, if they were caught during a war, caught coming onto the colony's land, they could be sent on a ship to a Caribbean island to be enslaved because they knew if they left them in that New England area, they could escape. Okay. Pulls, reasons you want to go to the Americas. You see an opportunity for wealth. You want to become famous, the first person to settle a place or discover a place. Again, fortune, right? You're looking for your fortune. Land. And so Europe has had a population explosion. And so the idea of being able to own land and buy land is a big pull for a lot of people, especially in the English. And again, who do we see in the colonies? It's really going to depend where you are. You're going to see a lot of wealthy men, a lot of indentured servants in the beginning. And if you were there in the early 1600s, you're going to see many Native Americans, right? Or First Nation people, as people in Canada refer to them as. And depending where you are, you're also going to see enslaved people from Africa. You're also going to see some people from Africa who are not slaves. In the early 1600s, people coming from Africa that had come on ships over from Africa, well, it was the only way you're going to get there. Some of them were actually treated as indentured servants, and actually after 5 years or so could earn their freedom, which is a little bit different, and that's going to change. So by the time we get to the mid-1600s, that's going to change, and that's really only in the English colonies that we're going to see that. We'll talk about that in our next class. All right, so let's look at the numbers. From 1492, when Columbus first arrives in the Americas, to 1640, right, a little over 100 years, 120 years, 87% of people coming to the Americas were Spanish and Portuguese. And they were settling sugar plantations and silver mines. So you're not really bringing your family with you unless you're very wealthy, and you're probably sending your children back to Spain and Portugal to be educated, or you're bringing tutors in for them. You're going to be a very isolated community. Right? So 87%, that means 8 or 9 out of every 10 people were going to be coming from Spain or Portugal. Get into the mid-1600s, it changes. Now we're getting over 1 million people leaving Europe. And this is what we think of main Europe, like British, French, Swiss, German. Okay. A lot of them, as you see here, are going to be indentured servants. So they're poor people looking for opportunity. And then by the time we get into the modern age of the 1700s, it's going to be the British who are crossing over. And so the population and demographics of who's going to be in the Americas drastically changes from 1500 till we get into 1700. And that's why I'm including some maps with primary sources for you to look at. But if you look at the maps, the boundaries change, the lines change, where people are living and who controls the areas changes a lot. So a lot of this is just a generalization. If you have a specific area that you're interested in, let me know, and I'll be glad to forward you some additional information. So as always, please let me know if you have any questions, and I will talk to you next week.